All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. John Steiner from Integrating Real Perspective. And today, this is an important one that I am going to be doing a podcast for today. High Fidelity from 2000. This movie entered into my life 3 years ago, and it has now become, I believe, to be my number one favorite movie of all time simply because it serves as a compass or a GPS for the career path that I've decided to take. And this movie is the whole reason why I decided to start a YouTube channel and become an influencer for reviewing movies, music, and books. And it's really too bad because I wish I would have found this film back when it first came out. I was 14 years old when this movie came out and going through some pretty wild changes in my life because I was, transitioning from middle school into high school. And 2 years later, I would find myself developing my own bias, my own unique perspective on music that would separate myself from my family's influence. Well, at least my mom's side, anyways, because I remember my upbringing was really on a very limited diet of opera, classical, folk, and very, very little rock music. Very, very little. Well, mostly the Beatles, Elvis, Simon and Garfunkel. Those artists were permitted. But as soon as I started getting into Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, that's when my mom started to freak out. Well, it goes even deeper than that, and I'm not really gonna get too deep into this because I want this to be a very lighthearted review. But um it this movie definitely echoes back to um where my life had gone 22 years ago when I started to develop my own unique tastes, when I began to develop my own personal philosophy, my own personal myth for how I wanted to live life. And I feel that the way that my love life my has gone for the last 22 years is something that can go all the way back to the music that informed me of my beliefs, my values, my attitudes, my dreams, my desires. And all that um can be found in the character of Rob Gordon, who is John Cusack's character in this film. John Cusack right now is my kindred spirit because of this movie. And I've watched a lot of John Cusack movies in my life, but this movie has got to be my favorite. And that's not something that I can take lightly. That's not something that I can just say flippantly. Because I also rewatched The Sure Thing, which was an 80s movie that he did, roughly around the time of a lot of those John Hughes movies that were coming out, like Breakfast Club and Weird Science. And I thought The Sure Thing was also pretty spectacular, as well as movies like Identity. That was a really good psychological thriller. Love and Mercy was one that I saw a few years ago where he plays Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys in the 80s. I thought that was pretty good. All those movies have something in common with John Cusack in that he brings this dreamy, helpless, romantic type of character. Um, And again, somebody that I can really connect with here. And that's why I was really delighted when one of my really close friends finally showed me this film back in 2021. So John Cusack, again, like I said, he plays Rob Gordon, a record store owner who collects music and builds a narrative of his love life based on the way that he arranges his albums and artists and songs into unique playlists. And he's even worked as a DJ at one point as well. Like literally every everything that he's ever collected in his life is analogous to specific events that have happened in his life. And mainly they have to do with the many different relationships he's had with women in his life. Like, you know, it can really be summed up in the opening scene. And right now I'm actually pulling up a draft of the screenplay, which I got off of Script Slug here. So I'm going to read the opening dialogue here that Rob Gordon gives. This, to me, really sums up into words what I have struggled to say my whole adolescent life and my adult life up until this point, up until where I'm at right now as a 37-year-old. So this is John Cusack's opening line. What came first, the music or the misery? People worry about kids playing with guns and watching violent videos. We're scared that some sort of culture of violence is taking them over. But nobody worries about kids listening to thousands, literally thousands of songs about broken hearts and rejection and pain and misery and loss. Did I listen to pop music because I was miserable? Or was I miserable because I listened to pop music? And here, I'm reading in between his lines the not a mini system, not a matching set, but coveted audiophile clutter of Macintosh and Nakamichi, each component from a different era, bought piece by piece in various nanoseconds of being flush. Yeah, no, see, this is me right there, and like all the different audio systems that I've collected over the years. I mean, I'm actually sitting looking back right now at my Kenwood hi-fi system and my record player that went along with it. This is the second hi-fi set that I bought for myself since the first one that I got, which I believe was a Panasonic. And that was gifted to me back in 2001. And I remember selling that one off, which was actually quite a tragedy, as well as all whatever CDs and records I had owned at the time. In fact, that's where I get now into this other description here from the high fidelity script. Big thin LPs, fields of them. We move across them slowly. Yeah. They seem to come to rest in an end of a few books. But then the CDs start and go on faster and faster, forever than the singles. Then the tapes. It seems the records, tapes, and CDs will never end until we come to Rob. Always a hair out of place, a face that grows on you. He sits in an oversized beanbag chair and addresses us, the wall of music behind him. Yeah, there's definitely something about this script that is just really unique. And John Cusack was actually a co-writer on this script along with um hang on here, along with Steve Pink and DV D Vincentis, if I'm pronouncing that name right. High Fidelity was actually based off of a novel by Nick Hornby, who I believe is a journalist. His name I remember had come up one other time in the past because he was the screenwriter, I believe, for the Reese Witherspoon movie Wild. And I know that he has been a music reviewer and an avid music lover, just like John Cusack has. So the two definitely were a match made in cinematic heaven to make sure that this movie became a reality. And the director of this movie, Stephen Frears, is British. This is actually his first American-made movie, filmed down in Chicago, of all places. And so the name of the place is called Championship Vinyl. And okay, it is a fictional record shop. However, from doing my own research online, I noticed that Championship Vinyl is in fact actually part of a structure that ironically is a structure that was found in Wicker Park. Boy, does that take me back down memory lane to my first movie review. So what what's also interesting for all those Wisconsinites listening to this podcast is that it's located, this Championship Vinyl record store, quote unquote Championship Vinyl, is located on 1532 North Milwaukee Street. Ha! Isn't that something? Just another reason why I love Chicago. And I'm sure there's a lot of Milwaukeeans who would agree with me too. But about the about the record shop, um, there is okay, so just another thing I wanted to add is that there's also an Instagram and a Facebook page for this as well. I guess there's an actual record store that was made um, to kind of imitate, give like a faux impression of the legendary record store from this movie. Yeah, but that's something that I haven't looked too deeply into yet. However, yeah, if you can dig up more information about this, feel free to leave information in the comments below. Because I definitely would like to know more about this supposed record store that did exist in High Fidelity. Yeah. Now, to get to specifics, what I found most fun about going back to this movie is this film really, really plays on my trivia fascination. When you watch this movie, the first scene where you see John Cusack and his two buddies in the film, played by Jack Black and I forget the other guy's name. Hold on one second here. Um, Barry and Dick are their characters' names. Jack Black plays Barry. Ted Luoso plays Dick, and I believe both of these guys were in. I know that Jack Black was in School of Rock, and I believe so was. No, never mind. I thought Todd Luoso was also in School of Rock. Okay. But anyways, um, the opening scene where we're introduced to the three guys at Championship Vinyl, against the wall by the front door. Well, okay, starting from the shelf on the back wall, and as the camera starts moving around and introducing you to the interior of the store, I have name checked these following albums in the store: the Yes album by Yes, Discipline by King Crimson, Window Licker by Aphex Twin, Before and After Science by Brian Eno, Back to the Egg by Paul McCartney and Wings, TNT by Tortoise, Synchronicity by the Police. Um, there's also, there's a Nick Drake album that was there as well. Hang on one second here. Um, Brighter Later, yeah, that's another record that was in the store. There are posters of Radiohead and Nightmares on Wax. And I am for sure certain that I also saw a copy of Dots and Loops by Stereolab on the shelf. And if that's not the case, Stereolab is actually referenced in the film in a scene where Caroline is right by John Cusack at the front desk and asking Rob, is this Stereolab? I like this. Now, I love Stereolab, but I only have three of their albums. And the song Loboob Oscillator from Transient Random Noise Bursts with Announcements is actually a new song for me. Yeah? So definitely not Emperor Tomato Ketchup, Dots and Loops, or Cobra and Phases. Definitely not on any one of those three albums. So yeah, I mean, lots and lots of trivia sprinkled throughout Rob's record store. And I can assure you, when you watch this movie and you pick out certain records and you think, oh, hey, that's an MC5 album, or that, like, oh, hey, I own that Bob Dylan album at one point. No, there's definitely something for everyone when watching this movie. Like every album that you can identify in that store will very, very likely amplify some part of your alter ego that you have personally identified with as part of some um, essential history in your life, some very, very candid meaning that occurred in your life because you picked up this album. That's how remarkable this movie is. Like, oh my gosh, I love this movie. That being said, I do have to get into one criticism about Nick Hornby, which is that, and I've known about this even before I started picking up on his works like Wild and this movie. Um, okay, so he isn't a journalist, he is an author, um, mainly a a writer about music, where he talks about his certain attitudes about certain musical trends. And there is one thing that pisses me off about him, which is his conservative take on music and him embracing traditionalism. He is actually most famous for really ripping into Radiohead's Kid A album. And I am so not okay with that because Kid A is one of my favorite Radiohead albums of all time. Like, uh, that album is the Fort Knox of classic albums, especially considering that album also came out in 2000. So both that and High Fidelity were turn of the millennium classics. So yeah, just had to get that little chip off my shoulder there. Just had to vent my complaint about Nick Hornby for a second. All right, back to all the good stuff about the movie. The core message to this movie that resonated with me so much was that it was about finding truth through what you listen, read, and watch. And it really goes to show the complexity of quote unquote taste among collectors. Look at how very different Cusack and Jack Black's character Barry are in terms of taste. Barry is much more flamboyant and more gutsy, with his musical preferences actually being a bit more traditional. And I've seen enough Jack Black movies to know this about him. Um, there's a scene where he's trying to get Rob to listen to more Beatles while Rob is trying to find more underground artists to be featured playing in the shop, like Massive Attacks, Radiation Ruling the Nation from No Protection. I've listened to a lot of Massive Attack in my life. Never actually heard that one though. So I thought that was a really, really nice deep cut for John Cusack to drop. So that's what Rob calls his top five side ones. Barry calls it, ad verbatim, a sly new declaration of classic status slipped into a list of safe ones. Very pussy, as he adds on to it. Easily one of the most quotable scenes in this movie. Barry's argument is that Rob isn't being quote unquote obvious enough with his preferences of music to play in the store. But that says a lot about personality, doesn't it? How two very different people can work in the same store together and how their biases influence the customers that they help. And then there's the girls that Rob ruminates over. My personal favorite had to be Charlie, Catherine Zeta Jones's character. She was the most fun to watch. Really electric, really smooth, sly, like a cat. And, although I couldn't get into Laura that much, despite the fact that she's the one that Rob invests the most time and effort into to get back, um, I have to consider the fact too that even if there was a Blu-ray edition where I would get to choose my own storyline and there is like an alternate storyline where Rob chooses Charlie over Laura, Zeta Jones's character would have to be rewritten as how she exhibited traits that Rob hated that were otherwise not obvious before, which just goes to show that physical attractiveness isn't everything in a woman when you reconsider your framework that you see women through, informed by the philosophies of music, books, and movies you acquire. Right. So, okay, that's the end of my review. I just wanted to keep this short and sweet. Um, and I did really, truly find this movie to click with me so much as far as what my current mission is as to why I started this YouTube channel, that it is definitely my number one favorite movie of all time. And I would highly recommend this movie. So then this way you can kind of understand where I'm coming from. Like this film is my anchor point. It's my doc that I go back to whenever I need a refresher on my principles, beliefs, and values with regards to how I review music, movies, and books on this channel. All right, well, cheerio, integrating real perspective, and I will see you back again on the reel. Cheers.